Namaste all. Welcome to this energy update. I'm covering a lot of themes in this particular update, so I'm time-stamping each theme that I go into so you can skip or jump into or come back to later. Because there is a lot going on in the world right now, and I've been wanting to deliver this particular energy update for quite some time, but I've been having to really fine-tune it so I can deliver it in a way that doesn't trigger everyone. Because the amount of information that I'm getting right now, which is shining a spotlight on ourselves, is just breathtaking. I've never received so much, and it's challenging because I'm having to look inside at my own shadow, at myself, seeing how I'm also carrying these traits which are uncomfortable to admit to. But that's the nature of the shadow, right? And this is where we are. We're in shadow 101 on the planet, and all of us are learning to take note of it, acknowledge it, admit it, and then discover how to work through it. And as always with a shadow, the more that we push it away, the more that it comes back into our life and shows its head everywhere it can, so that we can actually bring it closer. The shadow wants to be loved. So let's begin with essentially what is happening on the planet right now. As I'm sure you're aware, there is this extreme polarization that is occurring, and it's been occurring for a number of years. Okay, on an outer level, we probably first saw it at such an extreme level with Brexit, with Trump, and then we started to see it with the genders, with the rising of the female movement, and we've also started to see it with race, just recently with Black Lives Matter and what's going on around race. And it's going to continue. Now we're also seeing it with COVID in another form. And all of these essentially relate to binary conversations. So what is a binary conversation? A binary conversation is another way of saying that it is a polarized conversation. When we think in terms of polarization, essentially if you think of a pole, on either end of that pole are two polar opposite ideas. And from an extreme point of view, they cannot exist in the presence of the other, which is why they have such trouble with the other. So there's a natural tendency to negate the other's existence. And that extreme polarization is happening because as we move towards unity consciousness, what is the antithesis of polarization? It's unity. In order for us to really anchor the vibration of unity consciousness, we have to face our own polarization. And we have to depolarize. And this process of depolarizing is something that you've already been doing with your healing work. As you're facing your shadow, the shadow is essentially carries the essence of our polarized points of view, right? So when we're pointing our finger at someone, that Nigerian proverb, I think it comes from there, where it says, one finger pointed at somebody is three fingers pointing towards ourselves. I love that saying because it essentially is talking about the symbolic nature of reality, reflection, and that everything that we're pointing out, judging, criticizing, we have a direct connection, relationship with that, which is why it's triggering within us. And usually it's because we're also harboring some element of that within us. Doesn't mean we're exactly like that. We can also be the opposite. So I'll give some examples to help illustrate this point, especially when we're talking about the collective. And I'm going to start with the conscious movement, because right now the conscious movement is going through a huge underhaul. And I've spoken about this with friends over the past few years, and I haven't really talked about it publicly because it's something that may not make sense when it's kind of seen on that surface level of describing it in this way. And that I do feel the conscious movement, the spiritual movement, is going to implode. And it's going to rise up from ashes in a very different way. And I think this is a very good thing. And I've been feeling this for a number of years, actually. And there are many reasons why I feel that this is a good thing, which I'm going to outline here. And the reason I'm outlining all of this is because I wish somebody had outlined this for me many years ago, because I've got caught up in many different belief systems, narratives, and not question them because the nature of how we think as humans, and also our religious programming, which I'm going to speak about a lot here, greatly influences how we take on beliefs and assess them. So, the conscious movement and the shadow. When we become awake, right, and you awaken to your spirituality, it's an amazing, exhilarating, exciting experience. And as you become more aware of reality and more aware of your senses and what's going on, there's a natural tendency to want to tell others about it, right? We want others to see what we're seeing. And so we can also start to label ourselves and others, because this is what we do as humans. We need to label, we need to categorize to understand and organize reality. And so we start to see ourselves as being awake, and those who are not awake are asleep. And so we've come from the matrix or the mainstream, and we are the ones who have escaped. And we can see reality more than others. But the more that we talk like this, the more that we move into the realms of superiority and inferiority. We see ourselves as better because we see better, we see more than those who don't see as much. There's a huge assumption here. The first assumption is that what we are seeing is more valid than what another is seeing. And this is what we have to come to terms with in all facets of reality, that we are all seeing reality in the way that we're seeing it. And it's true for each of us, however difficult and challenging that is for us to ascertain. But what it does do, once we start to appreciate that concept, it takes us into a much more humble space of looking at the world. We move away from I know what this is, I know what I'm seeing, to I don't know, which is more true to reality, because we don't know. And there's lots of reasons I'm speaking about this, which is also related to what's happening on the planet right now with COVID and lots of other situations. But that movement towards I don't know actually takes a lot of maturity, and it's taken me a long time, and there's still a lot of beliefs that I have that I still feel that I know. It's very difficult to move away from that and start to have more and more space of I don't know. But I had a huge second awakening in 2015, which made me challenge all of my spiritual beliefs. It was a truly humbling, ego-smashing experience, which wasn't pretty for me. What that experience showed me was that all of the beliefs that I had taken on and assumed with such knowingness that they were correct, that I was also relaying this to others. We tend to relay information, knowledge, belief systems to others, especially when we haven't fully researched it or are knowledgeable around it or have had direct experience with it, in a very knowing way. And this is where it's very similar to religions. It's our religious programming, it's that preaching. And oftentimes we may not know that we're doing. We may read a book, we may watch a video, and it's that very persuasive energy that makes us drop our own inner natural willingness to just explore, assess it, use reason. We give it up to something that has targeted us on an emotional level, and we believe it, and we start to take it on with conviction. And even if it is a direct experience, it does not mean that it is true for everyone else. And so when I had this kind of awakening, it made me examine my healing work and how I talk about healing when people come to my sessions and I hold group transmissions. I now explain that this is something that I do not understand, because that's the truth. It was always the truth, yet I felt that I had to explain it in a way that I knew. Because this is the thing about the conscious field, the spiritual movement. It's very interesting because there is also the rise of the new guru. As much as we think that we're getting away from the guru and that we're all about power to the people, the new guru is everywhere. And it is us. We are the new gurus because we are all carrying that energy of that guru that we dislike. And I'm talking about guru in the sense of somebody abusing their power and how we're trying to move away from guru. In the purest sense, guru is actually an amazing concept. But when we think about power being centralized with one person and them using it in an abusive way, generally in the spiritual movement we kind of pride ourselves for moving away from that, which is why we're moving away from religions which have centralized belief systems, power, hierarchy essentially. But we're also carrying that in the conscious movement. This is the thing about healing. It doesn't just happen overnight. We don't just create something pure from something that has a lot of themes that we need to work through. We carry all of that with us because it's within us. We're the ones creating it from us. So we're obviously carrying all of those themes that we have to work through. And that new guru is essentially the part of ourselves that feel that we know without questioning. We feel the need to disseminate that information to persuade others to adopt our own belief system. And we have an almost passionate evangelical form, if we're not checking ourselves or holding ourselves accountable, to make sure that others adopt our belief systems, or attacking those who have different belief systems, especially the ones who have polar opposite ones. So we know we get into that territory when we start feeling threatened, when our belief system is challenged. No belief system should be unchallenged. Every single belief system should be allowed to be challenged and explored and assessed. If we feel threatened when our own belief systems are being challenged, then we know that we have taken on the identity of the belief system. This is dangerous territory, because that means we have to now align our energy to an idea that's outside of us. And that idea is something that can never be us. We are beyond ideas, we are beyond belief systems. And then we have to hold on to that religiously, right? This is where all these terms come in. And then we have to defend it religiously. And then we have to make sure that people understand who we are. We get very defensive, paranoid, etc. So when we're talking about this with what's going on the planet, with the conscious movement, there is the emergence of that new guru, which we have to be aware of. And especially when it comes to information around truth-seeking, conspiracies, when it comes to spiritual truths as well. When you get that very charismatic, very persuasive individual who is trying to disseminate information, if that isn't given with the space for the soul who's listening to have their own exploration of it, it's very disempowering. It's literally superimposing over that person's ability to research. How much of us actually do proper research into things? Not many. We take on experience, we read things. We don't have the time to do proper research. And so we have to take this into account as we move ahead. Because when it comes to all of our spiritual beliefs, we need to be as open to them, but as critical of them. And I use critical in the very positive way of just assessing, is this true for me? Does this work for me? I'm going to use this over time, and I'm going to see, but when I relate to others, I'm also going to share that I don't know. We don't like to say I don't know, because to say I know carries that energy where the ego is very proud to know. It likes to teach, it likes to say that I know. Come to me, I know it. It seems a powerful thing. It's not empowering. It seems like we feel powerful. But actually the most empowering thing is to say I don't know. It took me a long time to publicly say that about things that I was working on and I was attracting clients for, to actually say I don't know. And I'm still working to bring this into all areas of my life. It's not an easy path, but what I found, it is the most liberating, empowering path that we can start to move through, and we become far less threatened when our belief systems that we are working with are challenged. We start to have incredible conversations. And this is what happens with polarization. We don't want to have conversations with those who have polar opposite ideas, because everybody has lots of different views. And if we're just closing the door to them because we don't want to listen to them, all we're saying is I don't want to listen to this part of me that's trying to integrate right now. The reason we have a left and right in politics is because it's a direct symbolic reflection of our polar opposite nature that is trying to come together. So when we talk about the conscious spiritual movement, one of the factors that we're seeing right now is the modern witch hunt. Now, what is the modern witch hunt? If you're on the spiritual path, you'd be familiar with the witches who were persecuted around in the Middle Ages, devastatingly. And essentially it was women who were persecuted for being satanic, for being demons, for practicing witchcraft. And it was a callous nature of the few, those in the church and those with their own agendas and also those who feared these women. And those few used the fear of the masses, and the masses became the mob, and they began to persecute women, which is where the phrase witch hunt came. They were looking for witches and would persecute anybody. Anybody was a suspect. How does this relate to what's going on right now? With what's happening with the truth-seeking or conspiracy movement, and I've been involved in conspiracies all my life, from 17. And so it's something that's close to me. I believe in a lot of them still. However, notice the word that I'm using. I believe in them. Even with the most diligent research that I've done in any area, I still don't know. I haven't had direct experience with the people involved of any situation. I haven't looked at both sides. Even the best researchers, for example, in ufology, which I follow as well, they will always give a lot of time before they take a witness seriously. They'll do background checks. They'll see whether they have elements of schizophrenia, paranoia, attention seeking. They will still have to weigh it up because they've come across this many, many times. Unfortunately, a lot of people are seeking attention or making up stories or simply doing what I just mentioned, relaying stories as fact when they haven't had a direct experience with it. To say that we're 100% sure of anything is narcissistic. Of course it is. We can't be. So let's say we're 99% sure, which is still, highly arrogant for us to say that we are 99% sure of anything. That means there's a 1% chance that we're wrong. And it's up to each of us to weigh in the moral and ethics of that 1% of us being wrong on how it affects others. Because right now there is a witch hunt against lots of individuals for being evil. These fear-based stories, they program just like the media does, because it's the social media, we are exactly like our media. This is what I'm getting at here. We're all the same. And this persecution of these people, which we're doing, this is when the masses become the mob without any individual research. They don't need it. They just want justice. It's self-righteous justification. And that self-righteousness is what fueled the witch hunt back in the Middle Ages. And I believe that we are karmically healing that. For those who were persecuted and now persecuting, this is something that we do. Because this is an area that not many people want to talk about in the conscious field. We talk about how we've been hurt. We talk about healing our own trauma. We talk about us being a target of persecution. We never talk about us persecuting others because we don't like to see that. We don't like to admit that. How many workshops have you gone to where you're healing the persecutor? How many times do we act horribly to people? We say things that aren't nice. We do things that aren't nice. And we have to take responsibility for that. That we also can be malicious. We also can be judgmental, critical, and we also need to ask for forgiveness from people. So that persecutor, that part that we don't want to own up to, also reflects this idea that we as a spiritual movement, conscious movement, are pure, and we're pointing out the bad guys over there, which is that separation of the shadow. There is no doubt that there are people with nefarious agendas on the planet. But this whole idea of trying to label the movement, this small group of people who we never see, as evil, as satanic, as being the cause of all of our problems, further distances ourselves from it. And we become the pure white knights, saviors. And it allows us to not to look at our own shadow, because essentially everybody has a capacity for darkness within them. This is something we realised from World War II. Everyone has that capacity to be led into something. During these times, populism is incredibly powerful because it's very easy to take advantage of the people's vulnerability during a time of crisis and use that to organise them on both sides and use that for fear-based agendas. But really it's for power, to feel powerful by those who are taking the people into those ideologies. And so we each have to look at ourselves and ask, are we persecuting without actually truly using grounded research to know that we are doing the right thing? And if we really want to take down these people, what is the solution? How many people think about solutions? I've been involved in the protests, and it was humbling when I realised that the protests are great, but really the real work is happening by those behind the scenes who are meeting with those who they're having challenging ideologies with, having discussions with them, creating dialogue, which is very difficult, creating dialogue with the other side, and that's where change starts to happen. Okay, so do we really want change? If everyone's talking about peace, is that really what everybody wants? Or is it a cry for salvation? Is it a call for us to highlight just how much we've disassociated from our shadow, how much we think we are better, how much we think we are purer, and how much we need to burst our own bubbles and land down on the ground with everyone else and realize that we are all in the same boat here, all equal, all learning different facets. And it's actually the mainstream who we think we're breaking away from because they're not evolved enough, who have the greatest amount to teach because of the shadow, in terms of grounding, in terms of using reason, in terms of not running away from reality, in terms of facing what has happened. There's so much to learn from everyone. And this is the thing, if we keep adopting this idea that we are more than, we run the dangers of thinking we are more than everyone else. And I've had this, everyone has this. We have it initially at the beginning of our journey, which is interesting because that idea of the born-again Christian or the born-again spiritual awakening is when somebody newly enters something, there's a massive need to bring everybody else on. This isn't to judge you or judge anybody who's doing this. This is about us being aware of our own shadow and owning up to it. Because right now, if we're shining the spotlight on everyone else, who's shining the spotlight on the conscious spiritual movement? Who's shining a spotlight on ourselves? Who's holding us accountable? We have to. Because if we really want to move through these times, we have to hold ourselves accountable to our own shadow. This is why I feel the conscious movement is going to implode in some way, because that split is necessary for us to really break down the religious programming that has infiltrated the movement for a long time. And the only way it's going to break is for that bubble that is created, that everybody senses on the outside, is burst, and we start to integrate into the rest of the world, and spirituality doesn't become this separate movement. Spirituality is a way of life. It's very different. Spirituality is your way of life. It's your connection. You connect with everybody, not just those who are spiritual, who are awake. You start to recognize the beauty in everyone around. Now, I do want to just touch upon the conspiracy side with, what's happening with right now with COVID and everything. I've had a more intimate relationship with COVID. The fascinating thing for me was that because my dad was in hospital, I was in and out of hospital during the peak time of COVID. And I was actually in COVID suspect wards because my dad was in there and they thought he had it at one point. Let me tell you, when people have COVID, it's scary. When you see that breathlessness, which they have for days, they're on oxygen tanks or, God forbid, the ventilators. It is a scary thing to see, and it's the most troubling thing that I've seen anyway. And seeing the doctors and nurses freaking out because they don't understand what's going on, how it's spreading, the precautions that you have to take. So I had a closer relationship with it. Yet, if I didn't have one, I'd probably question what was happening as well, because especially for us in the first world, it's very alien for us to think about these world kind of collective events. And one of the problems that we have in a conscious alternative movement is that our desire to be alternative starts to create this such distrust about anything. We distrust anything that we're moving away from. But what has COVID provided is provided this huge instability in the world. And the only thing that's going to get us through is trust. So on one hand, we've got the universe saying, trust, cultivate more of your trust so you can help yourself move through this difficult period. And if those of you who've been through trauma will know that trust is number one. Trust and faith is number one to get you through. I know this from my own 15 years of depression. It's that one thing that got me through, which is why I have so much faith now in troubling times. I'm still always tested, of course. Universe will test all of us to our limits and make us stretch them. But that trust and faith right now is being countered with this distrust in the governments, in what's going on and what they're saying. They, right? Who are they? They are us. What I'm trying to say here is that we need to bring back our own humanity and see humanity around us, because there aren't these groups of people who are out there trying to get us. There are humans out there. We can label them and group them together as much as we want, but there are humans out there who are trying to make their way through this system that we've all created. And if we're looking for salvation, or we're looking to label and we're looking to judge and shame so that we feel better, we're only going to feel worse. This is going to be much, much, much harder for us. We have to come down off our own high horses, because we're all creating them, and come down to the ground level and see reality for where it is. And that's the humbling thing which I was shown, which is very difficult, because I had to admit to my own superiority, which I had been having, and I still have. There's lots of different areas. I see it in different ways, and also how much I was judging, and how much I was separating from reality, from the mainstream, from the matrix or whatever, and how many problems it was causing me with my spiritual bypassing, because obviously the mainstream and that level of reality reflects physical reality, the lower three chakras. What was the problems I was having back then? Lower three chakra stuff. And so I was favoring the spiritual, which I defined as anything away from the physical. But the spiritual isn't about that. So the spiritual involves physical life. The spiritual is everything. The spiritual is what you define. And that's what we're each exploring. But right now, the shadow is something that we need to shine a spotlight on. And these difficult conversations, such as what I'm having now, because it's not easy talking about this, because I know it's going to trigger, it's not coming from a place of judgment. It's coming from a place of opening up conversations that we don't really want to have, starting to step down from us coming straight in and defending what we think we know because we feel threatened, and just taking some time and going, okay, I'm going to take a couple of days and think about this. Is this right? Is this working? We know when we instantly react, that's coming from our ego desire to defend something. When we allow ourselves to sit with things, things start to change. And right now with COVID, whether you believe in it, whether you don't, whether you believe the government is trying to take away your freedoms or you don't, really, COVID is not a binary conversation. It's more complex than that. There is obviously something happening in the world which is taking people's lives that many, many people do not understand. Those who are doing medical research and those who have actual medical background do not understand. And so, what is really happening here? Are we really being oppressed? Are we the ones oppressing? Are we the ones persecuting? Are we the ones who are now becoming the very boogeyman that we're pointing out? This is the fascinating thing. And originally in my journey, my view of the government was very different. I saw them as cabal, deep state, Illuminati. Now I don't. I don't know if that exists anymore. It's been talked about, from my perspective, for 25 years. I haven't seen any evidence of it. I've heard it being talked about a lot. I'm sure there's groups of people who make decisions. Doesn't mean it's not true. Doesn't mean that they're not there. But what I'm saying is, what do I know? I do know that there are organizations, institutions which involve lots of people just like us, and they can be communicated with. If we really want change, we communicate with them. We create that change. Do we really want it, or are we just getting carried along for the ride? And with social media, there's lots of information coming out right now, thank God, around social media and the algorithms and how they highlight our polarization. They highlight it because, and this is a fascinating thing, because it's coming from almost a scientific perspective for them. They're trying to get us to engage more, right? How do we engage more? We engage more when we react. So they need those responses. The algorithm is looking for responses so that you engage more with their platform, so that you stay on their platform longer. And so the algorithm is working out on its own that in order for you to respond more, you need to react, because people react more. And that creates the responses it's looking for. So it shows more of what's going to trigger you. So the algorithm is showing us just how our nature is. This is an incredible thing. It's not showing us these evil group of people who are doing it. It's actually showing who we are. We're the ones reacting. We're the ones who are more responsive to these situations. We can blame it as much as we want. Just as the media, we can blame the media for producing fear as much as we want, but we're also doing the same on our social media. We're addicted to it. We promote it. It's the top of the reading list: crime, fear. This is something that's in our consciousness that we need to come to terms with, and we need to face, embrace, and realize that we all have elements of it, even if we think we've moved away from it. It's in there. It just may have moved down into the passive role. So how do you explore that shadow? Shadow healing work, of course, any type of healing that involves shadow, facing your shadow, facing things that you're unaware of, journaling, finding out where your trigger points are. This is how I do it. I go through the day, I might be triggered like 5 times, right? Especially during these times. And I'll start to write it out and explore it. Why am I triggered? What is triggering me about this? Am I doing it? Have I done it? And do I need to share about it? How do I share about it? Can I listen to the opposing ideas around this? And so this is difficult, especially when you've got very strong identity to your ideas. But as you start to do this more and more, you start to see that this world isn't falling apart. This world is birthing. And right now is the most incredible time to be alive. And if we can move away from this us versus them, and truly want solutions, truly want change that works for everyone, and start to see reality in different ways, we open up to what consciousness is trying to show us, that unity consciousness is here. So I'll just take you through a meditation to help you disengage from the collective events and disengage from even the words that I have spoken in this energy update, focusing on your breath, allowing your breath to move through you, visualizing a waterfall around you. The falling water is purifying, washing, cleansing. Breathing in, breathing out, inhaling, releasing. Allowing yourself to connect with your body, breathing into your heart center in the middle of your chest and visualizing a beautiful ball of radiant light. Asking that light to spread across your chest, move up and down your body as you invoke your divine I Am presence, connecting to your inner stillness, your inner beauty, your inner knowingness, your inner unknowingness, your connection to life, to all that is, to the universe. Breathing in, breathing out, engaging with your inner universe, your inner truth, your inner experience, your individual, unique experience. Liberating yourself from collective ideas, liberating yourself from societal ideas, liberating yourself from polarized ideas, dropping into the presence of this moment. Remembering who you are, remembering another story beyond all of the stories that are being played out on the planet right now. Remember a deeper story, a story that pervades and superimposes all other stories, a story that you return to. Breathing in, breathing out, and honoring your presence in this moment. Blessings on your journey. Namaste.